All right, hello everyone. My name is Dr. Joel Rosen. I am the Adrenal Fatigue Recovery Ninja, and I want to welcome you back to another edition of your Adrenal Fix. And so tonight we are going to be talking about the connection between thyroid disorders, and we're going to be talking about that and the relationship to the adrenal fatigue. So I'm sorry we're a little late, got a little late start, but you're going to get a lot of information tonight, and I look forward to trying to help you with your adrenal fatigue nightmare. So the reason we do these Facebook Lives is because there is a lot of misinformation going on out there, especially as it pertains to your thyroid. It's just mainly get you on Thyroid, get you on Armor, get you on a compounded T4, T3, and or even do some kind of radioactive frequency or take the thyroid out and get you on bioidentical hormones. And it's not really looking at the causes of why the thyroid is slowing down in the first place. And you'll see when we talk about one of the most important questions as it relates to a thyroid disorder is, number one, is the thyroid disorder a primary problem or is it a secondary problem? And I would even say with adrenal fatigue, is the adrenal problem a primary problem or a secondary problem? So what do I mean by that? I mean, if you have a primary hypothyroid problem, it means that the thyroid itself is falling asleep on the job. And that would be a great reason to take a thyroid stimulating hormone to help the falling asleep thyroid gland to wake up. And it's like a jockey on a horse. You got to, get that horse, unfortunately whip that horse and get it to ride. That's why a person is prescribed Synthroid or Cytomel or Armor or compounded formulas, Westhroid, so that they can get that thyroid that's not working properly to work properly. And I told you that 90% of people, it was the Journal of and I actually have it on my phone, but what I will do is, because I have to use my phone for doing this Facebook Live, I will post it in the link. But it was in 1990, and it was a reputable journal, and it was the journal, I think it's the Endocrine and Nutritional Journal, but it found that 90% of hypothyroid problems are autoimmunities. And I can't tell you how many people, in fact, the 84-year-old lady who's coming to see me in my office, who's awesome, never taken any prescriptive drugs in her lifetime, but she has some major problems, and she was never told that she has Hashimoto's. I ran some blood work, and in fact she has Hashimoto's. She was never, ever told. But she's never been on thyroid medication. So it's really important that if you have a thyroid 90% of the time that is a hypothyroid problem, and it's because of an immune-based problem, then it behooves us to figure out what's the immune-based problem. And the immune-based problem could be a lot of things. So that's what I really want to talk to you. Rita, I'll try to do my best to answer your questions as we go along, because I have an agenda, and then I'll scroll back up and see what the questions are and then get back into those. So we are going to incorporate my genetic testing into here, and then we are going to incorporate the thyroid mechanics in there. But first we're going to go over to my board over here. And so what we're going to do is we're going to look at the main function of the thyroid. So a lot of you don't actually know what is the main function of the thyroid. And the main function of the thyroid is it regulates the oxygen uptake inside the cell. So think about that. It helps the cell take in oxygen. Why does it do that? It does that because it needs to make ATP. And that's what this is here. This is the 5 complexes of mitochondrial health. I mean, in high school chemistry, when we thought about oxidative phosphorylation, or we talk about the electron transport chain, think about if I have a plug in the wall and it's delivering a current. Somehow there's a copper wire that's delivering that current and jumping electrons till eventually it powers the socket and produces a charge. Our body works the same way, except there is no socket to put, electricity into, but it does have these copper wirings, and it does jump from complex to complex, and then it hits the ATP enzyme and creates ATP. But if you don't have enough oxygen, or you're depleted in your oxygen, or you're hypothyroid and your thyroid is regulating your oxygen demands, then you are going to have a lot of problems that ATP requires. ATP requires us to think clearly. ATP requires us to detoxify. ATP runs the body. It helps our cells get minerals into and out of the cell, toxic exposures into and out of the cell. It helps to be able to repair and regenerate your DNA. It helps to deal with stressors, to raise your body temperature. It helps to maintain your metabolic health. So we see a lot of people that have a hypothyroid problem that can't lose weight, they can't focus, they can't concentrate, they don't deal with stress very well, and it's like, is it my adrenals? Is it my thyroid? And so I want you to think about the connection. So what happens is, when we have the body, the mitochondria senses, hey, there's something in here that is stealing my electrons. And usually it's going to be some kind of pathogen. And those pathogens steal those electrons. And we create a lot of free radicals. And as a result, your mitochondria tells the thyroid, hey, slow down the consumption of oxygen. We don't want to use those towards the pathogens. We need to use this for our own preservation. We're controlling our oxygen demands at our premium. We're not getting a lot of it, and we need to slow down other functions. So the mitochondria slows down, and that's called a cell danger response. The body's in danger, and it's telling the thyroid to slow down, and your body is pretty stinking smart. So what it will do is it will produce antibodies. It will actually create an immune response to the thyroid to stop it from using the oxygen to make ATP, to only get stolen by pathogens and creating too much free radicals. And that's a problem. That creates a lot of lipid peroxidation, creates a lot of cell membrane destruction, it creates a lot of joint pains, it creates a lot of problems. So as a response, why do we go into a cell danger response? Because we're stressed, we're overwhelmed, we have a toxic environment, we are always trying to keep up with different fuel supplies. So our body is so smart, it says, it's like a machine that has to coordinate its events like an airplane does, in terms of, maneuvering, making all these high-speed decisions. Is there enough oxygen? Is there too little oxygen? Is there enough food? Is there not enough food? Is it too hot? Is it too cold? It has to function with a lot of substrate or a little bit of substrate, a lot of oxygen, a little bit of oxygen, a lot of sympathetic stress, a little bit of sympathetic stress. It's always, always, always compensating. And so as a result, if we get infections, or we have toxic exposures, or we have chemicals, or we have we're going to talk about the most chemicals that actually impact the body, impacts the adrenals, and impacts the thyroid. But when we are exposed to all of these things, it causes basically the thyroid to on purpose slow down. And then typically, what do? We go on Thyroids, or we go on Armour, and then guess what? It was working in the beginning, and now it's no longer working, and so we get put on even more. So we go on from a couple grains to a couple more grains, or we added a couple micrograms, and now we're over 100, and your body is doesn't want to work that hard, and you feel worse. And then you look at your TSH numbers, and they're 0.000001, because your body just doesn't want you to make any more thyroid hormone. You're getting too much of it. So the connection between the thyroid and the adrenals is that stress response, because the adrenals are really having to deal with that stress response. And we're going to talk about that in a second. But we know the adrenals are those stress organs. When we get a stressor, the pituitary tells the adrenals to make cortisol, to make aldosterone, to make a lot of different hormones you don't even hear about, but it basically causes our sympathetic nervous system and our neurotransmitters and our adrenaline and our dopamine levels to rise, and that causes our ability to handle stress okay, but over time, now we don't handle stress well. So we're constantly, we're hyper alert. We get, stress at a moment's notice. And then eventually we deplete ourselves of our raw materials, and then we crash and burn. And that's really what happens. So I already mentioned it, is the question becomes, is this a primary problem or is this a secondary problem? And the majority of the time, it's a secondary problem. The thyroid and the adrenals are slowing down or overworking and breaking down because the body is under attack. It's under stress. It's not getting good quality nutrients. You're getting too many carbs. You're not getting enough fats. You're getting junk oils. You're getting foods that's contaminated with bacterias. You're losing the ability to secrete stomach acids. You're getting a lot of pesticides in your foods. And all of these are really, really depleting your ability to make energy. So what I wanted to talk to you about was what do we do is we look at, if it's not a primary problem, it's not occurring in the thyroid, is it a secondary problem? What tests would we look at to know if it's a secondary problem? And we like to look at these ratios, and this is the cellular hypothyroidism ratios. So we're looking at free T3 to reverse T3. And so reverse T3 is yet another way for your body to say, hey, thyroid, stop putting your foot on the gas and utilizing all our depleted resources and steal away a lot of our oxygen and increase our metabolism when we can't even, we can't even raise our body temperature, or we can't even make immune cells, or we can't make enough platelets and red blood cells, and our white blood cells are really low, and you're going ahead and trying to feel sexy, and you want to have libido, or you want to have great hair and great skin and good brain and focus and concentration, and you want to lose weight. We need it for this. And so what your body does is it ends up making reverse T3. So if it's going to make antibodies to slow down the thyroid, it can do that. But then it can be really smart and say, well, let me make some more reverse T3. Because you're obviously not listening to me, you're taking more thyroid hormone. I'm going to make antibodies to the enzyme that makes T4 and T3. I'm going to make antibodies to the binding globulin that transfers T4 around the body. And you're still taking more thyroid hormone, so I'm going to make more reverse T3. Reverse T3 is the inactive form of T3, and it binds to the receptors, and I joke around, it's like a slug that goes into the coin machine and it blocks any other coins getting in there. So it's another way to slow down the thyroid. And so if it's high, why does it go high? Typically goes high in times of stress. And so if we look at our free T3, which is the active form of the hormone, and we divide it by reverse T3, it should be at least above 0.2. Or if we look at the total T3 and divide it by the reverse T3, it should be above 10. The lady, the 84-year-old that came in who had really high thyroid binding globulin antibodies, her free T3 to her reverse T3 ratio was 4. I mean, it was really low, and we got to get that functioning and humming. We'll talk about that in a second. Another way we would look at the adrenals, is it a primary problem or is it a secondary problem? So many of you guys will ask me, it's a secondary problem. You'll say, what's the best supplement for my adrenals? And you won't say it's a secondary problem, but my thing is well, what's causing your body to get into cell danger? What's causing it to do that? Do you have a bad diet? Are you stressed out? Is there a bad marriage? Do you have chemical exposures? Because if I give you something for the adrenals, it's like me giving your body a fever reducer when it goes into a fever for a purpose. It's doing that because it needs to kill the bugs. it's slowing down the thyroid for a reason. So you do have to play the game a bit of giving you something right now and triage. I agree with that. Like, you need some Synthroid or you need some Armor to just give you a little bit of oomph, but you need to get right back to the cause and focus in on that. So what we do is when we're looking at your secondary adrenal problem, we look at the Dutch test, because it will look at the metabolized cortisol, which means if we do a value between first thing in the morning, or we do it at, the Dutch test works where you do it at dinner time, at bedtime, when you first wake up, and 2 hours later. So let's say dinner's at, say, 6, and 2 hours later when you wake up in the morning is 10. So it's really about what a 18-hour window or 20-hour window, or whatever, where it's looking at how much cortisol you peed out that day. That's called metabolized cortisol. That's your about 85%. Your free cortisol is the amount that's not binding to a protein. It represents 1 to 2%. So if we look at the ratio between how much you peed out totally to your free amounts, you can get a good idea, is this a primary problem or secondary problem? Hopefully that makes sense. The other thing I want to talk to you about is the most important environmental factors that impact the thyroid. There's 3 of them. The first one is heavy metals. So there's so many heavy metals in the environment, between cadmium, lead, arsenic, mercury, aluminum, and those are really going to junk up your thyroid. But guess what else is going to junk up your liver? It's going to junk up your kidneys and your fat-filled organs, your brain and your fat tissue. What can we do for that? I mean, obviously hair samples are going to be very good, and there's different protocols that you can do to help with relieving that. I have a couple of supplements I do want to talk to you about. One of them that I really do like is called Detox ND, and it's in a probiotic form, and it basically uses the broken cell wall of chlorella. I know a lot of you will say, oh, chlorella is bad, it doesn't circulate very well. This is a really gentle form that can really help with very, very subtle and no redistribution of the mercury. The other thing that you really get bombarded with are organophosphates. Organophosphates, pesticides in our foods, in the veggies, in our produce. It's going to really impact the liver. And if you want to fix these cellular hypothyroid problems or even adrenal problems, you're going to need to address your liver. The liver is really where 60% of your T4, that's the inactive form of the thyroid hormone, gets converted to T3, the active form. And when we have organophosphates, you're going to deplete your T3 supply inside the liver, and you're not going to deal with stress very well, and you're not going to deal with making an optimal amount of thyroid hormone. One of the really good things that we like for that is this thing called Premier Chem Detox, and one of the main ingredients is modified citrus pectin, which is really, really helpful for organophosphates. Obviously, eliminating the source and not getting re-exposed to it is going to be really important too. And then lastly, the other main exposure for the thyroid is radiation. I mean, think about the times where you went to the dentist and they didn't put a lead iron or a lead gown over you. That's going to impact your thyroid. There's a lot of different other sources of radiation, but that's going to be a big part. And one of the great things that we like for that is the green tea ND. And it has some really great polyphenols that can help you detoxify. And I just put that in the water, and it helps with radiation exposures as well. So, and then lastly, tap water. I mean, tap water, chlorinated and fluoride, and all of these halogens, they're going to help, displace iodine, and it's going to create huge problems with thyroid. So just getting off tap water is going to be really important. So I wanted to talk about that. I did want to talk to you a little bit about the thyroid mechanics, and we'll get into that a little bit. Actually, let's go over here. I wanted to talk to you about some of the genetic components and how that relates to everything. MTHFR, that's a big one. DHFR is probably the bigger one. So DHFR, what it does is it helps to recycle biopterin. And biopterin is a necessary substrate to make your neurotransmitters, and especially to make your tyrosine into dopamine. Now, tyrosine, it needs biopterin and phenylalanine and iron in order to be made. And tyrosine needs to, is a prerequisite for the thyroid hormone to make T4. And we also are going to need manganese for that and selenium for that. Now, I don't necessarily recommend going and micronutrient minerals and taking this mineral and taking zinc and taking selenium and taking manganese, but getting a good broad spectrum mineral is really, really important. That's why we take your pH in the morning or throughout the day and make sure you're 6.4 to 7.0 so that you are in a good mineral status. Iron, if we are not getting, if we have metabolism issues and we have liver issues and we have a chronic anemia, or we even have concerns with adrenals, there's going to be some iron metabolism issues. And iron is also needed in this step over here when we're talking about the electron transport chain and being able to make that ATP pump. So it's really, really hard. But basically you need to increase your digestion. I mean, so you have to digest your foods, you have to be able to digest your proteins, and you have to use natural sources of iron. Sea kelp, Irish moss. We have the supplement is ErythroPro through PRL, and it is a really great source of iron. And then also making sure that you're getting your branched chain amino acids could be really, really supportive as well. What are your thoughts on reverse osmosis filter for your tap water? I'm leery of bottled water because, and then I can't see anything else. I like reverse osmosis for this, getting out of some of the pathogens or cleaning it up, but then it demineralizes it. So it's better than tap water, but I am leery too of the bottled water as well because of the BPAs, and that's really problematic as well. So anyways, when we don't have, so branched chain amino acids and some iron support can help make tyrosine, and then tyrosine is going to be a necessary prerequisite for T4. Now, if that's not working, we are not going to make effective neurotransmitters, and that's going to ramp you up, and that's going to ultimately cause you anxieties, or that's going to create a lot of free radicals, which is going to cause that, that cell membrane and the oxidative phosphorylation and the different phases of respiratory ATP production to slow down because there's not enough oxygen and there's too much free radicals. I know there's a lot going on, but they're all related. As far as the other questions I wanted to answer is up here. Let's go up here and just look at the metabolism. So really, what we're looking at here is TSH. It goes over here, and it causes T4 and T3 to be made. And when T3 is made, 7% of it it's the active form. It's the part of the bean. So think of it as the coffee bean and the coffee grind. And when you have ground up coffee bean, you could put it directly into the machine. It's active and it's ready to go. That 93% is T4 is the coffee bean, and it needs to be converted in the liver and in the gut, and it needs to get there in the first place. And in a lot of the times, these binding globulins are deficient because we're not absorbing proteins, and our digestion is breaking down, and because of pathogens and because of inflammation, and that's causing us not to absorb our phenylalanine and not be able to make tyrosine, which is further slowing this down. So you can see how it's all convoluted and it's all related. When it gets to the liver, it makes T3, and then that T3 has to go to the cell, and it has to be accepted by the cell. That's a whole other problem. A lot of the times those receptors are not there, or it's being blocked by reverse T3. And that's why we look at the free T3 to the reverse T3 ratio. Or those cell membranes aren't working very well and there's nowhere to bind to because there's too much free radicals and oxidized cells, or you have a genetic predisposition. So there's a lot of things going on here that we have, and so I hope that I didn't make it too confusing for you. What I'll do is I'll go back and I'll look at some of your questions. So we first had here, how do you find out why adrenal insufficiency, hypothyroid, and AFib? I really feel like these conditions I have are related. Yeah, I mean, you look at your blood tests and you say, is there low-grade signs of inflammation, immune stress, glucose tolerance issues, absorption issues, liver issues, iron metabolism issues, other signs of metabolic issues like uric acid or homocysteine, and then you go in and you make special tests and you look at your gut health, you look at your hormone balance, and that's why I'm looking at blood, saliva, and urine to get a complete accurate picture. I can't open this up. You guys are welcome. That's why I've been trying to do. Wow, the DH of all polymorphisms are expressed. Yeah, DHFR is a big one. If someone has DHFR, I usually know they're going to have some neurotransmitter issues, and that they're going to need some either folinic acid, or they're going to need a really good high-quality B supplement. I really do like the B Max. They're going to really have to work on their absorption. Branched chain amino acids are going to be really good for them. Getting some iron support. But mostly getting out of stress and slowing down that whole rat race mentality. I think, Kathy, we already asked your question. Is there a way to change reverse T3 back to T3? Yeah, I mean, stress. I mean, trying to get a good quality meal, getting good nutrients, not being wound up in sympathetic fight or flight all day long, looking at repairing your gut lining, helping that liver detoxify and work better in all phases of liver toxins and liver breakdown. Phase 1 is usually is all enzymes. There are drugs that will slow that down. Phase 2 is usually methylation, but there's other glucose handling things, gallbladder support. All of these things will help that. What do you suggest when a gastric bypass doesn't allow for the absorption of fats and minerals? It can improve, and I would suggest bile support. I'm over-medicated for thyroid and have had Lyme and co-infections for over 30 years. DNA is messed up. Long story, and it doesn't, I don't know why Facebook Live doesn't allow me to see more of that. Start with the basics. Start with good quality foods, good quality fruit and vegetables, minimalizing the fruits, but looking at increasing your absorption, looking at maybe a genetic test, and looking at some of your polymorphisms and supplementing that way. I usually like starting off with antioxidants, so I look at mineral complexes, CoQ10, alpha-lipoic acid, glutathione, vitamin E. Those are the big ones that we look at, and then maybe starting to layer that on with whether there's a good mineral status, layering that on with a gut support, removal of foods, balancing your glucose, and then start layering that on with either removing pesticides, heavy metals, pathogens, and then really starting to just keep you there in that zone. So it's probably more than I anticipated today. If there's any other questions, let me know. I just got a text. I'm sorry. I have to pick up my daughter from soccer practice, and she's going to be really upset if I don't get her on time. But if there's any other questions, let me know. I'm sorry I rifled through all of that. There will be a part 2. Part 2 will be next week. I have a seminar from Friday to Sunday that's going to be all about thyroid mechanics. So we will be going over this in part 2, and then I'll answer a lot of your questions. So hopefully, go get her. I will go get her, and hopefully you guys got a lot out of that. I also do free 45-minute consults to troubleshoot really what's wrong with you, what's not working, what I feel you need to be doing to focus in on what could be working, what the genetic component may be related, and if there's environmental components. And it's not for reviewing your blood tests and telling you what tests to get beforehand and then reviewing them during the test or during the 45-minute consult. It's not for that. It's for just seeing what you're doing. A lot of you have told me you're seeing a lot of people, you've tried everything, and it's not working, and then only to find out there's some major things that are missing. So, and again, the adage is less is more. I see a lot of you guys doing some really great things, but you have to do less is more. Sometimes it's time for a reset and just stop the majority of the things you're doing and focus in on the 1, 2, 4, 5 different things that are the most important and start from that. Anyways, I got to run. Hope you find that was very helpful. Again, my name is Dr. Joel Rosen. I am the Adrenal Fatigue Recovery Ninja. I don't know if I like this little gray thing happening here. It's like this little trademark now. It's like, I don't know if you remember that basketball player. He played for Detroit. His name was Rasheed Wallace, and he had this little gray little thing here, like right here. I have it like right here. It's like, go away. Anyways, hope that was okay for you guys. I call myself the Adrenal Fatigue Recovery Ninja, and I try to help you recover from your adrenal fatigue nightmare. Take care and have a wonderful evening.